Stevie Wonder, the best at what he does. You can't really compare anybody else with Stevie Wonder because his music was the kind of music that anybody could record. But coming up with the lyrics like he does, time after time and time again, and a person who the only vision he has is the vision that he has from thought inside of his mind, and he comes out with gold, platinum every time he writes. I mean, I don't even know how to describe it other than great or the greatest.
Stevie Wonder started his career known as Little Stevie Wonder, and like his first album stated, he was and still remains a musical genius. Stevie Wonder was born Stephen Hardaway Morris in Saginaw, Michigan, May 13, 1950. As a premature infant, an accident in his incubator is where he lost his eyesight. At 4 years of age, Stevie Wonder's family moved to Detroit. That's where he and his 5 younger siblings started singing in church choirs. From there, a genuine child prodigy was found. Stevie Wonder learned to play the piano, drums, and harmonica by the age of 9. A friend of the family, Ronnie White of the Miracles, introduced Berry Gordy to Stevie. Berry Gordy immediately signed Stevie to his Motown label and gave him the name Little Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder's first hit, Fingertips Part 2, was the first live performance of any song to reach the top of the pop charts. It also marked the first artist to have a number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and R&B single charts simultaneously. At 21, Stevie Wonder established Black Bull Publishing, becoming Motown's first artist to gain complete control of its recordings. Mr. Wonder has sold over 100 million units worldwide. He is a member of the Rock and Roll and Songwriters Hall of Fame. Stevie Wonder has over 23 Grammy Awards and Academy Award for Best Original Song, and at age 49, he was the youngest ever recipient of the Kennedy Center Honors. Stevie Wonder has been and still remains an activist. He lobbied for gun control and against drunk driving, and because he spoke out against apartheid in South Africa, his music was banned by the government. Mr. Wonder was instrumental in making Martin Luther King Jr. Day a national holiday, and in 2009, he was named UN Messenger of Peace. Stevie Wonder is recognized worldwide as a music icon, with 5 decades of great songs like You Are the Sunshine of My Life, Superstition, and Sir Duke, which he wrote in honor of one of his idols, Duke Ellington.
Edward Kennedy Ellington, better known as the Duke, he's part of the royalty of this country. They got the King of England and Spain. We've got our royalty in this country. We've got our Duke of Ellington, our Count of Basie, our Earl of Hines. We've got Lady Day, but that's all not serious stuff. But Ellington, without the music of Duke Ellington, jazz would be a very, very limited thing. He wrote and composed and directed so much music, it's unreal. His history in music is unbeatable. And I put him on the same level as people do Mozart, Bach, Beethoven. Ellington was brilliant, and he left the music behind to prove that he was brilliant.
Duke Ellington earned the nickname Duke early in his life because of his regal and aristocratic demeanor. Born Edward Kennedy Ellington, April 29, 1899 in Washington, D.C. He died of lung cancer May 24, 1974. He was brought up in a middle-class household. His father, James Edward, made blueprints for the U.S. Navy and served as a White House butler for extra income. His mother, Daisy Kennedy, held it from a respected Washington family. Mr. Ellington began playing piano at the age of 7 and was writing music by his teens. Duke Ellington was one of the most sophisticated and important jazz composers and pianists to walk this planet. His music stretched in various other genres, including blues, gospel, classic, and he also wrote film scores and stage musicals. His career spanned more than 50 years. Mr. Ellington created over 2,000 pieces of music, including the standards It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing, Sophisticated Lady, and Take the A Train. Duke Ellington has a Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Academy of Recording Arts and Science, 13 Grammy Awards in several categories. He also has the highest civilian award granted by the United States, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which he received in 1969.
Count Basie, William Basie. I have prejudicial feelings about Basie because my grandmother was a cook, and Basie comes from Red Bank, New Jersey, and we were living in a city called Asbury Park and Long Branch. My grandmother had a restaurant in Long Branch, and she used to cook meals for Count Basie. And I knew who he was. I knew of him before I knew about him. Back in the 1940s, late 40s, early 50s, she used to feed him, the both of them. Count Basie and his band, he was another legacy. He was another innovator. And he created a sound of music that's still being played today and appreciated and respected. It's timeless. Count Basie's music, Ellington's music, it's all timeless music. Great jazz music.
Count Basie was born William James Basie, August 21st, 1904 in Red Bank, New Jersey. He died April 26, 1984. He was the only child of Harvey and Lillian Basie, who both was musically inclined. He was introduced to the piano with lessons from his mother. Count Basie got his nickname from a local DJ because he figured there was already a King of Swing, Benny Goodman, and a Duke of Ellington, and an Earl of Hines. In 1935, Count Basie formed his own orchestra that played swing jazz and emphasized great soloists like saxophonist Lester Young and vocalist Joe Williams. During the 1940s and 50s, Count Basie and his orchestra was one of the most popular big bands in the world. Count Basie rhythm section was second to none. His hits include 1 O'Clock Jump and Jumping at the Woodside. Count Basie has many honors that include the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He is in the Downbeat Jazz Hall of Fame. He has 8 Grammys, and as part of the American Music Series, the U.S. Post Office issued a 32-cent Count Basie stamp in 1996.
Groups. They had to be number one when it comes to groups. The Temptations had it all. I mean, everybody wanted to be a Temptation. Even the Temptations wanted to be a Temptation. That's mainly because when they sit back and have an opportunity to look at themselves, the way that they step, they glide, sing, even if you were a Temptation, you still want to be one. That was had to be one of the greatest male groups we've ever seen.
The Tempting Temptations. Having sold millions of records, the Temptations are one of the most successful male groups in music history. The Temptations brought class, a wonderful blend of voices, stylish, coordinated dance moves, and with a long list of hit songs that could only be remembered as classics. My Girl, Papa Was a Rolling Stone, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Treat Her Like a Lady. Yes, indeed, the Temptations had it all. With the help of music producers Norman Whitfield and Smokey Robinson, the Temptations stayed on top of the music charts from the mid-60s to the 80s. The Temptations have 3 Grammy Awards and are members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Temptations was initially formed in 1961 from 2 Detroit-based vocal groups, the Primes and the Distance. The Temptations' original lineup includes Melvin Franklin, Otis Williams, Eddie Kendricks, Paul Williams, and David Ruffin, who replaced Al Bryant. David Ruffin was later replaced by Dennis Edwards. The Temptations lineup has changed through the years. There's been 22 Temptations. The Temptations story is one of perseverance and dedication that extends from their origins in 1961 to the present day. NBC did a great miniseries based on the Temptations, and the movie The 5 Heartbeats was loosely based on their story. Despite their ever-changing taste in music and their lineup changes, the Temptations have maintained their style, class, and respect as one of the greatest groups the world has ever seen.
Is fading fast. Inspiration is a thing of the past.
James Brown is the godfather of soul, no question about that. But, another very multi-talented individual who was also very active in the civil rights movement with his music and with his examples that he set forth. I mean, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud came at a time when black people didn't even want to be black. But James Brown changed that. One of the all-time great.
James Brown, no longer a living legend, but a legend, left a legacy here of a form of music and entertainment that's still being emulated and imitated, but not duplicated.
So now, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for Star Time? Thank you very kindly. It is indeed a great pleasure to present to you at this time, nationally and internationally known as the hardest working man in show business, Soul Brother number one, Mr. Please Please himself. He brought you the songs It's a Man's World, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, I Feel Good, You Got Soul Power, Mr. Dynamite, the Godfather of Soul, Mr. James Brown. James Brown was born James Joe Brown in Barnwell, South Carolina in 1933. He died December the 25th, 2006. Growing up in Augusta, Georgia as a only child, James Brown learned to play the drums, piano, guitar, and sing gospel. With Terry and Bobby Bird, he formed a band. Initially, they played gospel music, then they played R&B music, and they called themselves the Famous Flames. The Famous Flames signed with King Records in 1956, and their first two hits, Please, 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 and Try Me, soared to the top of the R&B charts. Then they became James Brown and the Famous Flames. On October the 24th, 1962, James Brown recorded live at the Apollo, which he paid for himself because his record label did not advance money on live records. With the Famous Flames, he broke all concert records. And in 1964, James Brown album Live at the Apollo became the first LP in pop history to sell more than 1 million copies. James Brown became one of the greatest and influential entertainers of the 20th century. James Brown was the musician most responsible for transforming soul music of the 60s, funk music of the 70s, and rap music of the 80s. Mr. Brown and his music made strong political statements, and in 1969 he was labeled the most important black man in America and our #1 black poet. Mr. Brown was an entrepreneur. He had restaurants, radio stations, and his own music publishing house. James Brown's stage performances was second to none, himself being a dynamic showman with dance moves that were precise and out of sight. The band, or the JBs, had great musicians, Maceo Parker, Pee Wee Ellis, Fred Wesley, and Bootsy Collins, all who could keep the beat on the one. James Brown has over 100 singles to chart the R&B single charts. He has the highest number of singles to reach Billboard Top 20. He has a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Grammys. He is the recipient of the Kennedy Center Honors and was one of the first inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Ray Charles. When I was a kid, when I first came to Atlanta, Georgia, and I heard a song called Mess Around. You familiar with Mess Around? That was the first thing I heard I think it was one of the first things I heard by Ray Charles. And I could hear that piano in the background on that and a few other things Ray Charles was recording on Atlantic Records. I'm not promoting Atlantic Records, it's just I went out and bought the records and I remember that's what it was on. But Ray Charles was doing some fantastic rhythm and blues, but I could hear the jazz in his playing. And then he had all these musicians with him who were playing a lot of jazz in the background. They call it rhythm and blues, I call it rhythm and jazz, because I could hear it. My ears were telling me. I knew he was a genius before they labeled him genius.
Many musicians possess elements of genius, but only one, Ray Charles, was given the nickname because he completely embodied the term. Ray Charles Robinson was born in Albany, Georgia on September 23, 1932. He died June 10, 2004. Ray Charles was raised in Greenville, Florida, and at age 7, he lost his eyesight due to glaucoma. It was at the Florida School for the Deaf and the Blind that he learned to play the piano and saxophone. At age 16, he began playing and singing professionally locally. 2 years later, he decided to move to Seattle, where he formed his own trio. In order to avoid being confused with boxing champion Ray Robinson, he decided to drop his last name and be known as Ray Charles. Ray Charles was an innovative singer, pianist, and songwriter that was a true pioneer. He successfully combined elements of gospel and blues and is credited for inventing soul music. He is also one of the first artists to gain complete control over his music and his master tapes. Ray Charles is an American musical institution. He began recording in the late 40s with hit songs like Hit the Road Jack, I Got a Woman, What I Say. Ray Charles' music is a combination of jazz, rock, soul, country, and gospel. He has a dozen Grammys, and from the years 1961 to 1966 was voted Best Male Singer by jazz critics. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and received the Kennedy Center Honors in 1986. Ray Charles' version of Georgia on My Mind was made the official state song for Georgia.
Earth, Wind, and Fire. The elements of the earth. Baddest band in the land. Bar none. That's not an overstatement. Earth, Wind, and Fire especially during their heyday. They had to be, in my opinion, the greatest band of all time.
The elements of the universe. Earth, wind, and fire music brings uplifting messages of racial pride, African consciousness, and a spiritual unity in a mixture of jazz, funk, Latin, and soul. Earth, Wind, and Fire has a goal to spread positive change in the world through their music. Earth, Wind, and Fire was formed by Memphis native Maurice White in 1969, a 9-man lineup that featured vocalist Philip Bailey, Maurice White's bass-playing brother Radim White, and one of the greatest horn sections the world has ever seen. Maurice White is quoted to saying about the elements, "We are jazz musicians at heart playing popular music," and he states, "The essence of Earth, Wind, and Fire is hope." Throughout the 70s, Earth, Wind, and Fire produced multi-platinum albums. That's the Way of the World, Gratitude, Spirit. Earth, Wind, and Fire are great musicians with an awesome stage presentation. They incorporate live magical tricks and wear colorful African-themed costumes. Earth, Wind, and Fire has 6 Grammy Awards, 4 American Music Awards are in both the Rock and Roll and Vocal Group Hall of Fame.
Rick James. Rick James pretty much speaks for himself. He's slick and he's Rick. And if you don't know that, he'd tell you that his name is Rick James. One of the greatest writers, composers of music that we've ever seen. Rick had a lot of talent that a lot of people probably hadn't even seen. He was one of the greatest, and he had very true talent. He was a pioneer when it comes to funk music. He was one of the pioneers of that funk, and he also lasted into disco and beyond. So he's got to be top 10 of all time.
The king of punk funk, Rick James was born James Ambrose Johnson Jr. February 1st, 1948 in Buffalo, New York. He died August 6, 2004. Rick James was one of 8 kids, and it was at Bennett High School talent shows that he found his interest in music. At 16, Rick James left school and signed with the Navy Reserves. Rick James got his start as a bassist in various bands and was first hired by Motown as a songwriter in the early 70s. In 1977, Rick James' debut album, Come and Get It, went double platinum with #1 R&B singles You and I and the ballad Mary Jane. Rick James and his backup band, Stone City Band, became famous for their live shows with their colorful costumes and braided hair. Rick James' follow-up albums, Busting Out of L7 and Fired Up, had moderate success, but it was his 1981 album, Street Songs, that made him an instant icon. Street Songs went triple platinum and featured the hit songs Give It To Me Baby, Super Freak, and Fire and Desire that featured Tina Marie. Rick James had a successful solo career and went on to produce hit songs for The Temptations, Tina Marie, his own girl group, the Mary Jane Girls, Smokey Robinson, and Eddie Murphy. He got his only Grammy in 1990 with MC Hammer for Best R&B Song, You Can't Touch This.
Earl Lewis Garner, sometimes known as Hoochie-Coo by those in the industry who knew him intimately. This man was my greatest influence not only in music, but in life. He created an individual style of his own that his style was so unique that after a few notes you knew it was Earl Garner. He didn't play like anyone else, didn't sound like anyone else, and didn't want to be like anyone else. He was his own musical entity. He was brilliant, he was a genius, and there should be a statue erected to him in Washington, D.C. Hint, hint, hint.
Earl Lewis Garner was born June 15, 1921 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He died January 2nd, 1977. Him and his twin brother Ernest were the youngest of 6 children and was raised in a musical environment. His older brother Ellington became a noted pianist as well. Mr. Garner began playing piano at the age of 3 and was self-taught and remained an ear player all his life. At age 7, Earl Garner began to play on a Pittsburgh radio station with a group called the Candy Kids, and by age 11, he was playing on riverboats. Earl Garner is one of the most original, creative, and exciting pianists to emerge during the modern jazz era. Earl Garner was one of the most popular jazz musicians from the 40s through the 60s. It was his original song Misty, however, that sealed his stardom. He released the album Misty in 1954. Both Sarah Vaughan and Johnny Mathis enjoyed hits from the song Misty. And in the 1971 Clint Eastwood movie, Mr. Garner was asked to play Misty for me. Mr. Garner was one of the most distinctive pianists of all times. When you